Hello, all you positive heads. Welcome to a very special episode dedicated to none other than you, the HeAds themselves. I am your HeAd enthusiast and hostess for the day, Alexa Hauser. I have been blessed to have the experience of helping out with Positive Head social media for the better part of a year. And through my digital interactions, I began to realize, as did Brandon, that we have some incredible beings listening to the show who are taking the information that Brandon puts out through the podcast and using it to transform their lives and create wonderful things. You listeners are all a huge, huge part of the life force that propels this show forward through time and space, and we think it's time to bring forth some of you beautiful reflections and delve a little deeper into this collection of energy that is the Positive Head community. So as we shine the spotlight on our listeners, what we'll have them do is share their stories of how they attracted Positive Head into their life, the transformation it's facilitated for them, and what they're focused on creating now that they're in a more positive headspace. Also, this episode of the Positive Head podcast is being brought to you thanks to the support of Gaia. If you're not familiar, Gaia is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content online. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. Hello, all you positive heads. On today's HeAd Posse episode, our guest is Heather Pike. Heather is a writer and mindset coach who navigates challenging topics with warmth, vulnerability, and disarming honesty. Heather's personal experiences with trauma have given her solid footing from which to share how energy and the mind can be used to find beauty and growth in difficult and traumatic experiences of the past and present. Heather's upcoming book, Trigger Happy, Getting in Front of What's Holding You Back, focuses on how to successfully navigate triggers in the aftermath of childhood trauma. Hi, Heather. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Alexa.
So nice to have you here. And thank you. So, I'm, as I read this intro, I was like, oh, I'm excited to dig into this. This sounds like a book and a subject that not only me, but this whole audience could really, really use right now. So, very interested to dig into what you have going on right now. But before we go there, let's start with the beginning. So would love, Heather, if you could just, give the audience an idea of, what your story's been like, what your childhood was like, or just, what things have been like up until this point for you.
All right. Well, I had a pretty bizarre childhood. Not one of those childhoods that I didn't really realize how wild it was until it was over. So I was raised by a doctor who was also a psychiatrist. That was my dad. And then my mom was a nurse. And we moved 15 times before I was a sophomore. So there's usually people say, what, military brat? No, there's usually a reason for that. In my case, the biggest reason for that was that my dad was a con man, in addition to being the doctor, the town doc. He also would pull off little, fairly poorly managed, from what I understand, grifts everywhere we went. And so the small towns that he would gravitate to, because they were fairly easy to take advantage of, unfortunately, he would come in and ingratiate himself with the locals. He had 5 kids. I was the oldest. And so he had this beautiful family, and he was this, charming doctor, an intellectual who was charismatic and willing to take chickens, instead of pay if the family was poor. So very quickly, the towns would fall in love with my family. We always went to church somewhere. There were many denominations that we cycled through. I was baptized into the Church of the Nazarene, but 10 years later, we were missionaries for the Seventh-day Adventist Church in the Marshall Islands in Micronesia. So nothing stable, nothing the same. Always things were always fascinating, that's for sure. But my dad was raised in a childhood of trauma as well, and was my mom. My mom was too. That's one of the things, that I find everywhere. Anytime you have perpetrators, you have first victims. And my dad was molested when he was a child, when he was 5, actually, at least once by at least one person that we know. So then he turned the cycle on me. And I'm sort of just understanding how early that actually happened. But it certainly manifested itself strongly my 13th year when I was sent to live with him. And so there was that aspect. That was sort of my dad's side of our family psychosis. My mother's side was she was at least psychologically abused by her mother, and whose mother tied her to a chair. My great-grandmother used to tie my grandmother to a chair when she was 4 years old so she could go to work. And my grandmother would tell that story like it was, nothing. So generationally, these traumas were passed down and down and down. And their ripple effect spread onto the 5 of us. And I'll only speak for myself, but pretty dramatically. I will also say that in our the adult portion of all of our lives, we have each managed by choice and willpower not to perpetuate the cycle. All 5 of us have beautiful, healthy relationships with our children. So that's something, that we can be awfully proud of. But to just go, back, that's pretty much, that's sort of the nutshell. My mother was very, very physically abusive. We actually, CPS called on us quite a lot. There were food withholding issues. She was actually fairly sadistic. So, over time, it really kind of warped us. We were very sheltered, very isolated. It's one of the things, that helps that continue to work. And my parents were both intellectuals. It's one of the things that is often overlooked. People have a willingness to examine, accept abuse happening in lower socioeconomic groups. But sometimes, at least what I found in my exposure to child protection services as a child, if the family is at all well off or speaks well for themselves, then, there's nothing to see here, nice family doctor. And, so we were just overlooked so many times. And so my dad would either pull a grift or CPS would get called, and we had to skip town pretty quickly. So the things that gave me were an excitement for an adventure, resilience, the ability to adjust, the ability to mind map, which is something we could talk about later, but the ability to read people hard and fast, to read situations. And that came into play for later in life for my business, for relationships. I mean, there have been actually, it may sound odd to say after I describe that litany, but there have actually been a lot of amazing positive things that I can directly credit my upbringing with having given me.
Wow.
There you go.
Yeah. Wow. What an amazing story. And I mean, I love how you just brought it back around with, it sounds like, well, it's interesting because I literally just watched this show about people who con. Like, it was like a show that was recommended to me. And so it's so interesting how things pop up in your vibration. But, it must have been so interesting for you to have like grown up in that scenario. And I love that you just brought it back around by saying, actually it gave you a lot of gifts. Because I like to think too about how, we come in to these lives, I like to believe we pick our family, like we pick our circumstances for specific reasons, right? What's your take on that?
No, I completely agree. There have been times that since I ran across that concept that I thought if that was the case, I must have been nuts. But no, the more I look at it, the more I feel that the very, very broad range of experiences that I apparently gave myself through the two specific individuals that I apparently gave myself, I come into my days and my interactions, personal and public, and feel a great deal of empathy for a lot of different people, a lot of different situations. I can read, it's like once you speak a language, once you've heard a language, then you can sort of pick it up. And so I feel things, hear things. There's certain tones, that I can pick up that I wouldn't have had the capacity to catch were it not for that. And then the great thing about that is, then I have an opportunity to serve, right? Then I have something to navigate or to help someone else navigate. About 10 years ago, I went on a mission trip to Nairobi, Kenya, to Kibera, which was a slum, much like the mission area that I lived in as a child, which I didn't make the connection to at the time. But the orphanage we were tasked with checking out had an issue that several of us felt was abuse. We felt that they were abusing the children. And culturally, the situation there is quite different. Caning is common. Mm-hmm. But I just remember sitting about in a group and being really nervous. I mean, this church paid for me to go, and no one had spoken about that yet. And I was like, okay, so I just got to say something. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm seeing. And so once I spoke, and someone else spoke, and someone else spoke, and there was agreement down through the line after investigation that was happening. And there were other things that were happening, and eventually that particular orphanage was shut down. So, that's just an example of this benefits, oddly enough, of having gone through this sort of thing.
Wow.
I also was a runaway for a time, a total delinquent, ran away to the interstate when I was 14. And, people, so I can see abuse, but I can also see within delinquency, within crime, within, victimization, because I've been on so many sides of this story and through so many little alleys of it, I can see what's going on pretty often. Like I was, like I said, a horrible little delinquent. Ran away to the interstate because I didn't have anyone with whom I felt safe. But this is the smartest thing I ever did. It's rescued me, saved me, and probably redirected the childhood of my family, the rest of my family. So the biggest thing that it has given me is something I'm beginning to see come up in popular culture and in mainstream conversation nowadays, which is black and white are complete fallacies. Everything is shades of gray. And the best way to navigate all of these things is through lack of self-judgment, which leaves room for lack of judgment of others.
Yeah.
That's my primary thrust,
Yeah. And so how is that, all of these experiences and everything you're just mentioning, how has that propelled you forward? What are you working on now, that has spawned from that?
Well, for about 20 years, I was sort of paralyzed and, working in basically in sort of physical capacities. I was a designer for quite some time. I did have my own business. One of the common things about children and trauma, post-trauma, is that they don't always hold jobs well. So I was kind of one of those hypersensitive, hyper sense of justice. So I just didn't really do well long-term at jobs. And I finally just opened my own company, and it worked really well. I was actually had it for 19 years, design company. And, but it wasn't me, I've been wanting to write since I was 10. So finally, through watching the courage of some people who were in my circle at that time, watching them have the courage to step into their truth and tell it, I sort of gained permission to do that myself and just started pushing myself. Right. That's what I've got to do. Express that which I've learned, not just to, specific individuals that come to me, but to as many people as I can reach. So I started a Facebook page called Trigger Happy. I started a book called Trigger Happy, and the subtitle is Getting in Front of What's Holding You Back. I have a memoir and essays that's in development called The Strangler Fig. I'm working on a book on parental alienation. I'm just, all of a sudden, it's like a floodgate. So I've been, speaking on these topics, and it's just delightful to stand in the message of what I think I must have come here to give, right? Because I was actually thinking this morning, the key when I'm dealing with difficult things as they bubble up, because they continue to, 15 years of trauma is a long time. The key is to remember that I am not that. I am not that story. I am not that trauma. I am not, in a sense, I'm not even Heather Pike. I am an expression of the Creator with a message, and I will inhabit that message. I will inhabit that message through this vessel. So that's what I'm doing.
Love that. I was just really, I'm really appreciating you and your message. I think I really feel like a power and a strength coming from you, and just an authenticity. And I think that, sometimes, well, actually, could you speak to that a little bit? Maybe speak to, because I have seen in our Facebook group several times people posting about, narcissistic abuse or actual abuse or just terrible childhoods. And wondering if, you as being someone who's gone through these different scenarios, what would you say to someone who's going through it now? Like they're still entangled with it.
That's a great question. I think that the most important thing to start with as a point for self-awareness and a point for change is your beliefs. And a lot of people aren't actually in touch with them. They think they are, but they're actually not in touch with the deepest core beliefs, because those tend to actually come from programming, not really from examined self foundation. So the easiest way to uncover one's beliefs about what one deserves, about how one should be treated, about what life has to offer, is to actually just to look around at your surroundings. Look around at how you care for your body, how you care for your clothing, how you are cared for, how you care for your children. It is impossible to shift anything without moving into a complete commitment to self-honesty. And that is, at the same time, one of the most challenging things, because the self-honesty doesn't have room for patting over the top of those areas of responsibility which we hold to shift what's happening with us. And so a person who's in the throes of a narcissistic relationship has learned over time, has absorbed the belief over time that this is what they deserve. They are being fed to some degree by it, even if it's just because they have a level of comfort, because this is what they've always known. Mm-hmm. And so if the person is willing to look at themselves and their own responsibility first and their belief system, those two things are really, really good sort of walking sticks to shift out, to move out. But it's a time, it takes time and it takes commitment. I can say there is a book that my brother gave me that changed my life, and it is called Leadership and the Art of Self-Deception by the Arbinger, I don't know how you say it, group. It's a group that's specifically dedicated to teaching people self-honesty and how to attain it. And it's a really, really quick read. Great.
I'm writing it down.
Yeah, Leadership and the Art of Self-Deception by the Arbinger Group. that was sort of one of the first ones that really got me digging into my own, responsibility. And I have to thank Brandon Beechin and Positive Heads for another one, which is Oneness by Rasha. That was a powerful book for me. Because until we are willing to step away from paying attention to the areas in which we are being victimized or have been victimized and look at what our current responsibility is for shifting our circumstances, we're going to be stuck in them. That's just, so sometimes people aren't ready yet. Sometimes you got to, feel and learn and go through. And there's no reason to beat oneself up for that either. Sometimes you just have to sort of stew in a situation that's challenging before you can do all of that work, and that's okay. The key in that kind of situation is just to not judge yourself, just to go easy, to let yourself do and feel and experience and learn what it is you must need to.
Beautifully said. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm an EFT practitioner, and that's, it's so interesting to learn about the ways that it's like we think we just need to get out of these problems, or these situations, or we need to find the way out. But the way out is the way is going in, or is just accepting where you are and just accepting that you're in this situation to begin with, And I think, right. And I also think what you were speaking about self-honesty, and gosh, it's what was coming up for me when you were talking about that was I don't even know. I feel like there's so many levels of programming sometimes, and so many levels, just the experiences we've had, that I don't even know how to know if I'm being completely honest with myself. I feel like there's been times when I feel like, yes, this is honesty. And then only to realize that's just another layer, and you're going deeper and you're going deeper. And I guess that's the point. I mean, being honest, meeting yourself as much as you can allows you to go to the next level. But it's self-honesty. It's such an interesting thing, because how do you know if you're really being honest with yourself when you have all these ideas that have been implanted into you? You know what I mean?
It's true. It's very, very difficult. And not only those ideas which have been implanted into you, but those ideas to which you hold very firmly because they're really kind of necessary for the path that you're choosing at that current moment. I can tell you that in my own experience, there's actually a physical sensation. And I found it because I wanted so badly to be honest with myself. I had a circumstance with my son, who is 16, and he lives with his dad part of the year and with me part of the year. At a certain point, he had a pretty intense decision to make. And I said to him, if you want to be a part of this really, really mature decision, the only thing that I ask of you is that you approach it with responsibility and examine your motives and meet full on every individual in this particular decision who will be affected. As I said that, and played it through and began to watch his reaction over the next month or so, I suddenly sort of realized oh my gosh, I just asked something of him that I didn't do in a previous situation that impacted him. And so when I sort of felt that feeling, there was a bit of a heart explosion. So there's a physical sensation oh no, and I felt this instant in this instance where I was looking at this particular situation, the desire to smooth it over, putting a nice little layer of butter over the top. I was sweet. I handled that beautifully. I did the best. No, I didn't actually. And the feeling, there's a physical sensation in my core that goes that wants to do the buttering, that wants to do the patting back into place. And if I can identify that and push through that, well, then I'm liable to have some pretty difficult self-reckoning, but then I can move forward.
Yeah, that was a good visual that you just gave me, for sure. Yeah, smoothing over. And I understand. It's being honest in the times when you you didn't feel like you showed up fully, or you showed up in a way that didn't feel authentic to you, or how
we don't really like to think badly about ourselves. It's difficult to admit, particularly those most subtle things. Marcus Aurelius says in his sort of stoicism essays, something that I'm going to paraphrase really badly, but to the extent that no matter what action we take, over time, it will harm someone. So our mandate is just to do that which feels the most true and right and good in the moment. I know I mangled that, and I apologize, but that concept, that no matter what we do, at some point there will be harm. To me, helps bring it out of action, out of the judgmental realm, and into one where we just navigate based upon what really does feel the most true and real and imperative in the moment.
Yeah, I feel like what you're saying with that is, it's like so many of us take action based off of all these other factors that we have, right? Like we factored so many other people and things into it, but really we're going to, no matter what we do, we're going to harm someone. So the best action to take, you're saying, is the one that feels completely authentic to us and aligned with us. Yeah.
And one that's not reactive. It can be responsive, but it's not reactive, because reaction has a tendency to be other based, where response can leave the space for self-examination and finding right action as it is authentic to self. When I first got divorced, I had this 10 years ago. I was in such a flurry. I had been in definitely in a narcissistic relationship. My mother was one, so what else would I have done? But moved straight into another. And I was just in a flurry of all the things that were happening to me, and all of the terrible things that were being done. And I got a brand new lawyer, and she said, "Honey, I hear you." I was like, "He's doing this and he's doing that, and this is happening and that's happening." She's like, "Honey, I hear you. But when are you going to stop reacting to him? Like, when are you going to take charge of your own life?" I was like 35 at the time, and I was stymied. I was like, "But did you just not hear me? I mean, he's doing this and he's doing that." And he's, "Yeah, but all of the things that you're doing are in reaction to that. I mean, this is a hamster wheel." So,
so recognizing the part that you're playing,
it's absolutely vital.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. I like that illustration of the hamster wheel. Definitely helps you see that, reaction. Absolutely. Wow. Well, so this book, Trigger Happy, sounds awesome. Getting in front of what's holding you back. So when is this coming out?
Well, just as soon as I can get it out.
Nice.
That's the best answer I have yet. If I'm super lucky, it'll be out by the end of this year or the beginning of this next year. I won't say lucky, I'll say fortunate, but it's my primary thrust. So, that's the timeline I'm looking at.
Awesome. And
it's just, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I would love to, do you have something like some take or highlight or some essence of it that you can share here with people, just about, I don't know, maybe a piece of it that's really resonant with you, or that you think might be resonant with the people listening right now?
Well, the biggest thrust of the book, it's a bit anecdotal. That's what I've got. I don't have the letters alphabet after my name. I do have plenty of life anecdotes and, growth from them. I also did sort of begin to research psychology, trauma, mental health pretty intensely about 10 years ago. So I've really done some intense research, and very often what I would find where trigger navigation in particular was concerned was the advice, one should avoid the trigger. That's like number one, avoid the trigger. Man, really? You just can't. First of all, where in common parlance, under any other thing that you're trying to heal from, does it say avoid? Avoid getting a headache. Well, dang, it's here. What do I do now?
Yeah.
So particularly with something like triggers, because there are just thousands of things, depending on your circumstance, that can be triggering. And we live in a really, really triggering, world right now. Our political situation, just the combination of systems that are failing us and politics that are coming down, around our shoulders, I think is creating a situation for people that are sort of walking in trauma just by being here. So that
I feel like the definition of trigger is like, to me, I think of it as like anything I can just like walk into. Like maybe that's not the actual definition, but it doesn't feel like something, it feels like something I deliberately cannot, or I specifically cannot avoid because it's going to come up. So
Exactly. And there's a wonderful book called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Yes. Oh, it's an amazing book. And he does a really, really good job of sort of animating for us what triggers are, why they are so impactful by describing the reaction that we have when we're in a trigger, to explain that the way that one can know the difference between triggers and simply stressful situation is, are you suddenly feeling bodily sensations, physiological reactions that are similar to those that you might have felt in the original circumstance and can't otherwise be explained? You're having a panic attack, is your face flushed, your heart racing, you feel the fight or flight, sequence happening within your body. And if that's the case, then what's happening is your body is responding as though you're currently going through that exact trauma that you once went through. And that's really freaking challenging to navigate. And so the key is figuring out, as I say in the subtitle, how to get in front of that, how to actually use your triggers as guide points for finding where you have unacknowledged, unexamined, unhealed trauma. And through that examination, finding the tiny little space between when the stimulus happens and when you respond, and capturing that space to remind yourself right there at the beginning, oh, I'm not there. I'm not then. I am safe. This is now. I'm here. I'm, grounding down into your current circumstance and reminding yourself, I don't have to respond to the situation from that place. Yeah. So it's just sort of a good discussion of how I learned to do that. Pull in some research, explaining, what it is, explaining different therapies for it, because there really are quite a few, and just really specific discussion when I looked about to learn more about how to handle that for myself. I really didn't find anything, and I thought, well, I'll fill that space.
Yes, absolutely.
So because there's a lot of academic stuff, there's a lot of psychological stuff. There are quite a few studies and white papers, but there doesn't seem to be much that's accessible to the average Jill or Joe who wants to just try to figure out what the heck to do when these things come up. And there's a lot of us. Childhood trauma alone is, I can't pull out the statistic, but it's estimated to be a epidemic, proportions, impacting way more people than anybody realizes. So I think we really need a map for how to navigate.
Absolutely.
That will help not, bring those same issues to our children.
Yes. It's a way to stop the pattern, stop the transfer. And that's really exciting because, when you do look at transform, my EFT teacher, Sonia Sophia, who's on the show quite a bit, always says your triggers are your treasures. And they really are, because when you find your triggers, and you were alluding to this, when you find your triggers and you find a way to transmute them essentially and work through them and see them from a different light, they actually become like points of power for you. They actually become places that, I think you said this, like places that you can work from and work with and And yeah, it's really, it's an awesome topic. I'm so happy that you're covering it because it really is something I 100% agree. I mean, I was so triggered as a child all the time, and growing up and throughout my whole adolescence, and I mean, my whole life, I was going through stuff. And I just remember I never knew how to deal with my emotions. I didn't know that I was even being triggered. And it was just not something that was taught anywhere around me. And I know that everyone listening can probably relate to this. Like, very few of us were taught how to deal with any of that stuff. So it's so awesome right now to see this explosion of people and information that's coming out with the guide, basically, of like, this is what's going on. This is, like you said, the map. This is where you go from here. And this is how to turn your, triggers to treasures, essentially. And it's really exciting to me because I'm like, wow, what is the next generation going to look like?
Right. It's true. Because because DNA is hierarchical. So, once we learn how to do this, and then bring the children in with, if we think they can navigate an iPhone with, with ease, the same thing will be true at some point for, emotional intelligence and, emotional and interior technology. I think that tech really is a mirror. External tech is a mirror of what's going on internally anyway. So I agree with you. I look forward to that very much. I think that, one of the best things that's happening now is that as people are willing to have this conversation, as people are willing to move into the public discourse, what was for decades and generations held as a private sort of warping, mutating secret, family secret, as we're willing to have that conversation, then other things come up. It's like an onion; it's a bit layered, So the next thing that comes up and is happening for us right now is being able to understand and examine the nature of codependent relationships, the relationships which built in those situations of trauma, and how to navigate our way out of that and become healthy in our relationships, which we can then pass on to our children, so that generationally they really stand to benefit on our shoulders.
Yes, absolutely. And this is why I love how you just said that. And this is also why the greatest gift you can give the world or your children or your children's children is your healing, is your own healing. And that's why it's so interesting. You brought up codependent relationships and codependency. It's been a big theme coming up for me, something I've been working through in many areas of my life. I also work with many different, like people pleasers and people who are working through that. And I think that's a giant trend in our society. And so it's interesting because I'm a people pleaser too. As a people pleaser, we think if we please others, we will be safe. And this is because of codependency. Like, if I make this person happy, then they'll be safe. Then they'll keep me safe. This is just one way it could play out. Sure. But it's truly and I feel like there's a trend with moms here, for example. It's like, if I just give to other people, then somehow that will like fill me. But it's like the greatest gift that any of us can give to any other person is filling ourselves. And I mean, we've heard this, like, fill your own cup. You can't give from an empty cup. But truly, like what you just illustrated that's why. It's because when we heal ourselves, we end these patterns. And then the gift that we give down to the next generation, to our children, is the model of the healthy relationship, the model of strength, right?
Right. I think that starts with exhuming our relationships with our parents. I think that what we often fail to realize is that our interpersonal relationships, our romantic relationships, the patterns for those are laid in our parental relationships. And those can be super difficult to see straight or to really sort of piece out the wiring. But that's where our programming comes from. So exhuming those relationships and being honest about them leads us to be better prepared, have a little bit of a manual for addressing how we operate within relationship. and not expecting the other to hold the responsibility for, shifting things. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No.
I just feel like I hear so much talk about, relationship codependency, but a very, very understandable morass of parent-child codependency starts. That's where it starts. And I can say that, with complete self-honesty, I realized I had a codependent relationship with my own son. Man, that was pretty staggering to realize, that sweet baby wouldn't do anything wrong, just sort of facilitating for him, doing for him, giving to him things which are handicapping in the long run. You said something else that I really wanted to examine, but I lost it. I'm sorry.
Oh, good. No worries. No worries. Yeah, I mean, we could dig into this topic all day. Honestly, it's so present and it's so relevant, and it's very cool that it's becoming so present and relevant. You're gonna say something? I
agree, and I just found it. So the thing I think that's key to it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. When one is sort of exhuming one's parental relationships and sort of trying to figure out what those dynamics were and how we can avoid acting out of that blind program, the best thing to do is to approach the parents and the self without judgment. My feeling is that, there's another thing we hear all the time: love is the answer to everything. And that's not just a cliche. That's absolutely true. And in my view, love is a really, really way too big and puffy a word. I think that true love is actually acceptance. And I think that the part of the reason that some people who struggle with self-esteem and struggle with forward momentum, the reason that they have difficulty sometimes loving self is because fundamentally, how in the world could they love themselves when they don't even accept themselves? One can't have love for something unless one has acceptance of it without condition. And one can't have acceptance of another, certainly without condition, if one hasn't the capacity yet to accept oneself. Darkness, light, muck, gold, all of it. So that's the place to start, is looking at what part of myself am I unwilling to acknowledge? What part of myself am I unwilling to accept? What part of myself am I trying to repress? How can I pay attention to them, honor them, take a really, really good look at them, bless them, accept them, and from that seat, move forward? And man, there's a whole bunch of topics you have to do that with, in your life. Like I said, I had a codependent relationship with my son. Well, you know what? When I first realized some of the things that I had done and the impact that had created, I was brokenhearted for 3 days. I cried for 3 days. I was so upset because that was the relationship that I cherished most in my whole life. But then I was like, well, geez, it's a little bit understandable. I'll give myself a bit of a break here. And now I just have the responsibility to move forward in awareness now that I've seen it. And I can actually, speak to my son about it. He's 16. I can say, listen, I've become aware of something and I apologize. And I take responsibility for it. And I will do everything in my power to maintain awareness of it and make sure that it doesn't continue, so that you and I can continue to grow in a very healthy and open manner. So that's all I can do. And if I can do that about every topic, man, I have to be on top of the world pretty soon.
Yeah.
Right? Absolutely.
Absolutely. I mean, just showing up is huge. And that's showing up to me. It's just showing up, being ready to, being authentic and being open with just even, for your son, for you to say that to your son. I mean, he's 16, but I'm sure he can feel that. He can feel the power of that. Like his mom saying, what I did, I made this mistake, but I'm showing up differently. I'm committed to showing up differently. And the impact that must have on, a child to witness their parent doing that is really, really impactful. So This was awesome. Heather, thank you for wrapping up on that note. I think that was a perfect thing to end on, perfect questions for everyone to ask themselves, to do some inner work. And where can people find you if they want to get in touch with you, or where can they find your book? Where can they keep up with you if they want to?
Right now, I'm at the just starting, place of marketing it. So my website isn't even up. So I'm just going to say the Facebook page, because all of the news will come there, and that is Trigger Happy. And I also have Instagram page, which is Trigger Happy, but it's all pretty new. So jump on, come along for the ride, learn along with me, and I'm really looking forward to having a greater, further dialogue on the topic.
Awesome.
Back to you, talk to some of you guys, interact on the Positive Heads page. Super, super grateful for you, Alexa, for Brandon, and for the Positive Podcast.
Thank you so much, Heather. Thanks for coming on and sharing with us. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. That's it for this week's episode. If you're a listener with a story to share and are interested in being featured on a future episode of this special series, you can email me at alexa@positivehead.com. Also, if you're craving more consciousness elevating content, be sure to check out Gaia, which is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content on the web, where you can stream an incredible 7,000 plus exclusive videos covering 5,000 years of wisdom. As you all hear Brandon constantly say, it's a daily conscious effort to maintain an elevated vibration. And if you're looking to journey deep down the rabbit hole to do so, then Gaia is the best place we know of to do it. Period. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. Otherwise, tune in next Friday for another HeAd Posse episode. And until then, as Brandon always says, journey well.